Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Smith. I'm the interim director of the University of Chicago's Smart Museum of Art. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, Black Wall Street Journey, a conversation with cultural and business leaders Rick Lowe and John Rogers Jr. Racial equity, financial prosperity, and the socioeconomic health of African Americans are central to the work of artist and MacArthur Fellow Rick Lowe and his Black Wall Street Journey project. I'm especially pleased to welcome Rick tonight. His work has been an inspiration to me since we were together in Houston in the early 1990s, just as he was getting started on the now legendary Project Row Houses. His Black Wall Street Journey project is part of the ongoing multi-site exhibition Toward Common Cause, Art, Social Change, and the MacArthur Fellows Program at 40. This project, spearheaded by the SMART in collaboration with the MacArthur Foundation and partners across the city of Chicago, is taking place in museum and gallery spaces around the city, at social service organizations, and on public buildings. You can see it around Chicago through mid-December. Our topic this evening is one of huge significance for our city and our nation, and now more than ever. And I look forward to a dynamic conversation with our two esteemed speakers. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We're using a webinar format, so only the participants in the program will ever be seen on screen. The volume is turned up to its highest level, so please adjust your sound as needed. And the conversation this evening is envisioned as precisely that, a conversation. We want it to be an interactive discussion, so please submit your questions via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen at any time during the talk. These can be directed to Rick Lowe, John Rogers, both, or to our moderator, Valerie Van Meter. Questions from the audience will be answered at the end of the conversation, and we will accommodate as many questions as time allows. I would now like to welcome moderator Valerie Van Meter to initiate our Black Wall Street Journey program. Valerie is CEO of Parity Partners, LLC, a boutique consulting firm that develops DEI workplace strategies and solutions and provides individual coaching. Through this work, she has supported organizations such as Chicago United, the Financial Services Pipeline, and Northwestern Mutual. Previously, Valerie served as Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, leading the Central Bank Services Division, among others, over a number of years. And she is a proud alumna of the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. Valerie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Stephanie, and welcome to our audience. I'm delighted to be here this evening to engage in a provocative discussion of Black wealth building in Chicago and our country at large. Black Wall Street Journey, the title of Rick Lowe's art project for the current exhibition, Toward Common Cause, is at the forefront of today's most pressing social and economic issues. And it serves as a foundation for the citywide project organized by the Smart Museum of Art. I'd also like to take a moment this evening to just acknowledge the recent passing of two great icons within the Black community. Our own Tamil Black, a UChicago alum and jewel to the city of Chicago, as well as General Colin Powell, whom I'm honoring tonight by wearing my dad's Black World War II Navy veterans pin. Two great public servants that we should give thanks to for their significant contributions. As Rick will share in a bit, Black Wall Street Journey was conceived to better understand and improve the economic and social health of Chicago's South Side, from the vantage points of its residents, businesses, and other leaders. I'm eager to hear about the journey Rick and his team experienced as they created what's been coined social sculpture, and to probe the questions and challenges, as well as the bright spots in Chicago's Black economy. Rick's project and this talk have their inspiration in the centennial anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, as well as this year's observation of Tulsa's historic Black Wall Street. Having a rich personal and professional connection to Black Wall Street, we're also thrilled to have with us this evening nationally renowned entrepreneur, businessman, and philanthropist, John Rogers Jr., whose great-grandfather founded Black Wall Street. Rick, it's an honor to be with you this evening. And John, I always come away a better person having spent a little time with you. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a little bit of background about our speakers tonight. Rick Lowe is a renowned artist and professor of art at the University of Houston, whose approach to community revitalization is pathbreaking. Rick has initiated arts-driven redevelopment projects in Houston, the acclaimed Project Row Houses, and other cities, including the Watts House project in Los Angeles and a post-Hurricane Katrina rebuild in New Orleans. Rick's pioneering social sculptures have motivated a generation of artists to explore more socially engaged forms of art making in communities across the country, as well as internationally. Rick's work has been exhibited at Houston's Contemporary Arts Museum and Museum of Fine Arts, the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, and a wonderful museum in South Korea that I dare not try to pronounce, as well as the Venice Architecture Biennale. Rick is a 2018 to 2021 visiting fellow at the Neubauer Collegium for Culture and Society at the University of Chicago, and a recipient in 2014 of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation's Genius Awards, which recognize unrestricted fellowships to talented individuals who have demonstrated extraordinary originality and dedication to their creative pursuits. John Rogers Jr. is chairman and CEO of Ariel Investments, the nation's largest minority-owned mutual fund company. He serves as vice chair of the board of trustees for the University of Chicago and is the great-grandson of the founder of Tulsa's Black Wall Street. John's passion for investing in business began at age 12 when his father would give him birthday and Christmas gifts of stock. And this interest bloomed while he was at Princeton and afterwards when he went to work as a stockbroker at William Blair and Company. In 1983, John founded Ariel, focused on disciplined value investing within small and medium-sized companies, an approach that the company continues to drive today. He's been highlighted alongside legendary investors Warren Buffett, Sir John Templeton, and Ben Graham in the notable book, The World's 99 Greatest Investors. And his professional accomplishments extend to the boardroom, where he's a member of the board of directors of McDonald's, Nike, the New York Times Company, and Ryan Specialty Group Holdings. Following the election of former President Barack Obama, John served as co-chair of the Presidential Inaugural Committee in 2009. And more recently, he joined the Barack Obama's Foundation's Board of Directors. And I'll share with our audience one of John's most noteworthy accomplishments, and that is the fact that John is the first human being to have ever beat Michael Jordan to 3 points in a game of one-on-one. clearly, with Rick and John on deck tonight, we're in for a great conversation. But to set the stage, I'd like to share a short video, and then we'll delve right in.
The Black Wall Street Journey is a platform that joins many others in trying to reshape the narrative around the economic plight of African Americans. I was inspired by my involvement with the 1921 Tulsa Massacre centennial. Not only was the massacre a destructive event, it was also a part of amazing creativity and imagination of the African American people who were there. They rebuilt their neighborhood in the face of the kind of terror that was put upon them. This exhibition became an opportunity to think about what would Black Wall Street look like in the 21st century, and how do we talk about the journey of African Americans trying to find economic stability in this country.
My great-grandfather was a real leader in the Tulsa community at the time, and his hotel and land was worth over $2 million. After the Tulsa Race Massacre, he was able to sneak out of town. People wanted to have him arrested and wanted to ultimately possibly lynch him. That $2 million versus hotel and land, what it would be worth today would be an anchor for multi-generational wealth in our community. So our wealth was completely snuffed out during that horrific massacre. The only thing that I inherited, which is very, very important, is his outspokenness. How our wealth gap continues to get worse and worse, generation by generation. One of the things I keep saying is our anchor institutions here in Chicago and around the country need to be committed to working with minority-owned businesses in everything we do, and insisting the majority of institutions have diversity on their teams. And if we are all on message around that, our education will be better, our healthcare will be better, and our local cities in this country.
The main narrative of Black economics is that we're in a deficit. And there's another side of the narrative that's about the resilience, the brilliance of the Black community in America. Chicago has been economic mecca for African Americans. It's also an opportunity to see how it's doing currently and how it could help us think about the rest of the nation in terms of the economic plight of Black people around the country.
Rick and John, please join me on the virtual stage.
Hey, John.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you too, Val.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I'm so excited about this evening, and I'm going to start, Rick, with you, because I'm just really fascinated to know how someone who is a classically trained artist, in the fine arts, no less, right, comes to conceive of a project like Black Wall Street Journey. When doing background, I read in a Wall Street Journal article about what I'd call your light bulb moment, maybe, when this young high school student challenged you to, instead of just making work that represented the daily lives of those residents of the Third Ward in Houston, why didn't you instead affect that reality through your art? So please share with us and take us through your mind's journey, how you connected all these seemingly random dots, unrelated, between art and Black wealth building to come up with this project of Black Wall Street Journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. And you know, I mean, it's been a process for me. You know, it's been a process for me, as like many artists. Many artists are trying to do things that have real impact on the world, and oftentimes that impact goes to individuals. You know, if you look at a work of art, everybody have access to that, and they can look at it and have a personal, you know, it can have personal impact. but there are many artists that are trying to have more societal impacts in a broader context. And I was one of those artists. And yes, when that young person, challenged me on, why can't artists use their creativity towards something that had a practical application to it? That was the thing that kind of, led me down the road of this social sculpture that you mentioned earlier. And that, led me through Project Row Houses and a number of different projects. But how it got to Black Wall Street Journey is, my using the idea of social sculpture in thinking about the world as a piece of sculpture, and that each and every day we're all sculpting it, no matter what role we play, whether we're sweeping the streets, whether we're giving care to the elderly, whether we're, being an investor, whether we're being a home, everybody's contributing. And that's how we managed to get Project Row Houses off the ground, was basically creating a platform for everybody to come in and participate. Not one person had the ability to do that project on their own. It took lots of different minds and efforts. And apparently, that's been a part of the Black Wall Street journey, of Black people coming together, pooling their resources, because everybody didn't have it all by themselves, and working together to manifest things. And so coming out of the work for the centennial to commemorate the 1921 Tulsa Massacre, to me, it was just fitting that we should also use this as an opportunity to reflect back on what got the Greenwood neighborhood to where it was when it was destroyed, but also, what was there that allowed the people to rebuild it. And that became something that was really interesting for me. And it's kind of an odd place for me to be, because I hadn't spent any time focused on business. My work has been mainly in the nonprofit sector and that kind of way. And so to shift and start thinking about, the role that business has played in the struggle, the same struggle that I've been working in the nonprofit sector, the business community has played an equal and critical role in that struggle, for the advancement of Black people. And so getting into this in Chicago, it was this, it was a great opportunity to be able to leverage the resources of, the Smart Museum as the hosting entity, the MacArthur Foundation as the premise for the exhibition, and then to really draw upon some of the great history that Chicago has around this idea of being, the Black metropolis, and being a place that has its own history around, the triumphs of Black economic advancement. And it just so happened that, with John being there and also being connected to, Tulsa, it just, it's been a dream come true to be able to have this as a platform to start this conversation. So I'm really happy to be here and with you and with John here.
Well, great. Thank you so much. That's fascinating. And talking about sort of that intersection between Tulsa and Chicago. John, we learned through that wonderful opening clip that your great-grandfather was the founder of Tulsa's Black Wall Street. So your family has a long history of entrepreneurship and building not only, I would say, family, but community wealth. And so, given that legacy and then what you've built of your own with Ariel, through your Black Corporate Directors Conference, you created this framework known as the 3 Ps. And Rick talked about how business is critical to help building the Black economic base. So clearly the success of business diversity is a key pillar. So John, would you share with us what the 3 Ps are and why it is so critical to helping to expand Black wealth.
Well, thank you. It's a great opportunity to be here, and I appreciate the question. It's great to be with Rick, who I first learned about from my daughter, Victoria. And she was a huge fan of Rick's and knew all about his work, and they got to know each other. And then we ended up getting connected sort of separately along the way. Well, I think my daughter helped facilitate it, but we built this relationship over a long period of time. So it's just great to be able to share the stage with you today. The 3 Ps started out of an initiative that actually I started with Melody Hobson, my co-CEO at Ariel, and Charles Tribbett, who was a longtime senior partner at Russell Reynolds. We created a conference for African Americans on corporate boards called the Black Corporate Directors Conference. And the idea was to bring together African American directors to get to know each other, network with each other, share best practices, learn from each other about how to be a leader in the boardroom, how to get to be the chair of the appropriate committees to be able to make a difference when you're in the boardroom. And also the idea was from the very beginning to help inspire African Americans to fight for each other in the boardrooms, to make sure that large corporations that have a Black on the board are interested in making sure they have diverse teams in their leadership ranks, having diverse board members on their board, and spending money with minority-owned businesses and Black-owned businesses. To facilitate that, the conference, we would always bring together not only the African-American directors. Our last conference, we had 200 African-American directors before COVID. But the second thing we would do is we'd bring in CEOs from major corporations, Black and white. So over the years, we've had everyone from Jamie Dimon, President Bob Zimmer, to Don Thompson, the former CEO of McDonald's, Ursula Burns, Ken Chenault, always bringing in a diverse group of leaders to help hopefully inspire people to come to the conference, frankly, And then we've had dynamic people like Valerie Jarrett there, and we've had entertainers from the founders of the Scandal television show, Judy Smith, to George Lucas, the film producer. So we've always tried to have some interesting people. We've had athletes from Magic Johnson to Doc Rivers. It's just been a very diverse group of people who come to our conference every year. What we do on Friday night of the conference, we always have what we call the conscience of the conference. And it's someone who can remind us of the responsibility that we have in the corporate boardroom to fight for economic justice while we're in that boardroom. The hypothesis being is sometimes when you are the only Black person on the board, you get uncomfortable and are not willing to speak up and speak out around these important issues. That was kind of the real premise of all of this. And to help facilitate that, we've always tried to get people who either are true believers in Dr. King's work or actually marched with him. So on Friday night, we've had everyone you'd expect from Harry Belafonte, Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharpton, Ambassador Andy Young, just go down the list. And we've actually had President Obama one Friday evening. And, it's just, again, this hypothesis, we get there, sometimes we get too quiet, we get too shy. So what we decided to do was to create these 3 Ps, to leave all of our directors with 3 things that they should be measuring when they get into the boardroom, and getting everyone to agree to do that. So number 1 is philanthropy. We wanted to make sure that you're keeping track of how your philanthropic dollars are being spent on the corporate board that you're on, to really see is money going to civil rights organizations, or is it just going to the local opera or museum or what have you? We wanted to make sure that the Urban Leagues of the world and the MANs of the world and Pushes of the world were getting their fair share of philanthropy. Second P was around people. And of course, measuring the people to make sure that people in the leadership roles, folks on the management committees, people in the C-suite look like us, that are African Americans, and to hold management accountable to that and measure their performance in creating truly diverse teams at the top. And the final P is around purchasing, to keep track of how the money is being spent by category, to make sure that we're not just being pushed into the low margin supply chain spend of this term supplier diversity, which is often around construction and catering and janitorial services, but really being able to be included in the spend that includes professional services, financial services, and technology. And the way to get that done is to keep track of all the spending by category and get rid of the term supplier diversity and utilize the term the University of Chicago actually coined called business diversity, because the University of Chicago has the most progressive purchasing efforts in the country when it comes to working with minority-owned companies in everything that they spend money on, from professional services, again, financial services, technology, public relations firms, government affairs firms, everything you can think about, advertising, media. And they're the only university in Chicago that does such a program, and one of the few, if any, in the country that have done that. So using that term business diversity.
A lot of that has been due to your efforts, John, in acknowledging as well.
Well, thank you. I just say the last thing I have to say, President Bob Zimmer has had a huge impact on this issue, and his team, Derek Douglas and Nadia Quarles have just been fantastic. And so as usual, Chicago's leading the way.
Well, all right. Well, since we kind of landed on that topic, let me talk to you a little bit about metrics. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be representing the Booth community very well if we didn't talk about metrics and statistics a little bit. But I want to take it in a different angle. We can talk about all the negative data that, in fact, in the vignette earlier, there were a lot of data presented that talked about the wealth gap that Black America faces. What I want to talk about are sort of green shoots, and whether there are some different measures of success that we should be focusing on, perhaps. So when I was with the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank, and this was in the early recovery from the 2008 financial crisis, at our board of directors meetings, we would, listen to the directors give their reports. And we were always anxiously awaiting to hear some news of green shoots or some semblance of growth in the economy. So what, both you and Rick, I'd be interested to hear, what kind of green shoots do you guys see happening in Chicago's Black economy? And are there some other more novel ways that we should be sort of measuring or thinking about what success looks like?
Well, John, were you gonna? Let me just say this.
Go first.
Yeah. Let me just say this. And I haven't heard that term green shoots before. Maybe but
that's an economic term. Yes.
See, I'm learning. I'm constantly learning in this new venture here. But yeah, I guess I've been looking for that green shoot. I mean, that has been the thing. When I first went on this journey of thinking about, what would Black Wall Street look like in the 21st century, I'm looking for those stories, those stories of hope, that give, positive kind of stuff, positive perspectives. And as we started through some research support through the Newbar and University of Chicago, getting researchers on the ground, what I just started to realize was that there was something wrong. I mean, nobody could find information.
No good numbers.
No, there was nobody. I mean, I would go to those meetings and I would listen to the stuff they're coming up with, and I'm just thinking, this is all just depressing. It's terrible. It's not, I mean, where's inspirational stuff? And I kept saying, I didn't want to be, I don't want to put rose-colored glasses on and say, oh, we have to just talk about how great, because we know there are struggles, right? But we don't move forward only from our struggles. We move forward oftentimes too from our successes too. So I wanted to hear what those are, and how do we, I just broke it down. I started thinking about it on my block in Houston, where my studio is, it's very low income, area. And I just keep thinking, these children on this block, how are they going to do better than where they are if they don't know that better is out there? Who's telling the better story? But as you said, it's just not out there. I would Google every kind of way I can, Black wealth, Black advancement, what every time it just goes to the gap. And so finally, I guess the end of last year, something occurred to me, and I want to explore this, and maybe you all might have some thoughts on this that can help me think about this, but what I started to think about was that in all the research that's out and all the stuff that's written, it's all written in a comparative way. It's written in comparative to other racial groups, but it never looks at how we're moving among ourselves or in different pockets. So one day I was in Bronzeville with Bernard. Come on, I'm just going blank on Bernard's last name, at Urban Juncture. And I said, Bernard, if I ask you to tell me something that is inspirational and hopeful about the Black economy, what could you tell me? And he had a very interesting approach that shed some light for me. He said, well, I don't know about in general, he says, but I can tell you this. On 51st Street, back in, 30, 40, I can't remember how many years ago, he said, there were X amount of businesses on this street, hundreds. And he said, if you look back, 10 years or so ago, it was down to, almost nothing. And then he said, but within the last 3 or 4 years, there's this and there's that and that, and then it was like, okay, wow. Okay, so if you look at the overall picture, in comparison to other communities and what they're doing, maybe, you may come up with the negative numbers, but if you look at it relative to where people are, then you might see some growth. So I started thinking about the marathon, analogy is like, if you want to run a marathon, but you're only looking at, the top marathon winners as the ones that you have to measure yourself by, you would never get out of bed to run a marathon. You have to start with yourself. If you can run a mile, then maybe the next month or so you can run 2, and you just keep going from where you are and not, trying to place yourself in comparison to, the folks that are much more advanced. And I think so I'm curious about that and exploring that and see if that might give some insight into how to find the green shoots.
John?
Well, some of the green shoots.
How do you react to that?
Well, I was going to ask you, try to answer your Chicago question earlier. And, as you know, I'm a loyal Chicago guy, and there are some green shoots happening here. And I think one that I'm really excited about is the Civic Committee of, which is the organization many of you know is of our sort of 84 largest, most significant businesses in Chicago. And after the tragedy of George Floyd's murder, the Civic Committee came together, and, in the past, they focused on new runways there at O'Hare. They focused on education reform or pension reform, and they take on these big giant issues. They decided to take on the issue of the Black wealth gap and made a commitment to really start to try to drive forward to build larger businesses, Black-owned businesses of scale here in Chicago. And it's a really exciting thing they're doing. They got McKinsey and BCG to do the pro bono work on creating a process for these large companies to help support building large Black businesses here in Chicago. Jim Lowry, who's a longtime partner of BCG and has been well-known entrepreneur, just wrote a great book. He's been part and parcel of this initiative. And they came up with some data. You asked about data earlier, and it was interesting. They looked at the various ways the dollars get spent in the Chicagoland area and found, like, if you look at the top 15 categories, the number 1 category was business and professional services, about $85 billion, with profit margins typically 5 to 20%. 10th on the list was construction, about $24 billion with profit margins around 1%. So as I said earlier, this prior focus on supplier diversity was pushing Black businesses into the lowest margin, least important parts of the spend, while the wealthiest people in Chicago were people, again, in professional financial services and technology. If you think about it, some of the great, entrepreneurs of our day, Joe Mansueto and Morningstar's technology and finance. You see Ken Griffin with his being the wealthiest person in hedge funds, creating his wealth here in Chicago. You go to look at the Madison Dearborns, people creating lots of wealth in private equity. So the Civic Committee got it and gets it. And so they've created this enormous program where they're going out and talking to leaders throughout the Chicagoland area And they've come up with this commitment first to try to build out large technology businesses of scale in the African American community. And they've been talking to the folks that buy technology services throughout Chicagoland and coming together to create a way to really build some things of scale that will employ people and create real multi-generational wealth. And then they'll go category by category into other sectors of our economy. So it's really impressive. And the last thing I would say is Chicago has some models that they've been able to build on. McDonald's has a long history of building large Black businesses of scale, not only franchisees, but people who do everything from manufacturing sausages to croutons. And so they've been using the McDonald's model. And Exelon has done a great job of creating real multi-generational wealth and hiring Black businesses across everything that Exelon spends dollars on. And I already mentioned to you Chicago as a model. Finally, they're talking to Booth alum and lab alum, Jason Tyler, who's now the CFO at Northern Trust. And Northern Trust has a very, very good program around diversity, not only in the management team, on the board, but also in how they spend their dollars. So the Civic Committee is using these models to build out what we think will be the most exciting program in the country to build large Black businesses that can be scalable, that again will leave a lasting legacy on our city.
So can I ask a question? Val, I mean, I'll ask this question to both you and John, because I mean, just from business standpoint, it's like, how do we, I mean, what you just laid out, John, I think, I mean, just me personally looking around and I find those stories, right? I find those green shoots, but it's not a part necessarily of the African-American narrative. I mean, just in general, right? Then, when we, if you ask, I'm almost willing to bet if you ask people, questions about, what represents poverty, a Black person would show up, or this, I mean, or, what represents, crime, a Black person would show up, I mean, so we have, our narrative does not incorporate those things that you just talked about. And I'm curious about, what your thoughts are on that, and how do we, I mean, because that's been my interest in the Black Wall Street journey is, how do we shift the narrative so that we can make those green shoots that you were just talking about more accessible in the broader society that will become inspirational for more and more people.
So John, let me have you quickly answer that. And then I want to pivot because I want to give our audience a chance. We've already got some questions and I want to make sure that we give them some time to ask what's on their mind. So John, quickly, if you would.
Well, I think what I would just reiterate is it's just so important that we go back to the future. In the past here in Chicago, we had these giant Black businesses, Johnson Publishing with Ebony and Jet, that celebrated our successes and saw that and put on the front page of the tragedies at Emmett Till. And, they employ hundreds, if not thousands of people and create an enormous amount of philanthropy. The same thing with Johnson Products with Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen. George Johnson created Independence Bank, the largest Black bank in the country, started Soul Train with Don Cornelius, prepaid 3 years of advertising in Essence when they were having trouble. He could go on. And when it came to philanthropy, he was responsible for 70 tables at the Urban League dinner every year. And when Dr. King came desperate to make payroll, he was there to pull together Black entrepreneurs to bring. So reason I just say that quickly is that we need to get back to where Chicago was the Mecca, where we had these large Black businesses that hired people. There were inspirations, they were role models, they were involved philanthropically and politically and in the civil rights movement. Then we had a Harold Washington here. We had a Maynard Jackson in Atlanta. These people were fighting for us. And we've moved away from that. And we've lost these large businesses of scale that could have all of that impact. And frankly, a lot of our political leaders have not been talking about the importance of this. So we have to make this real for our people to see that if we can build strong Black businesses, we'll create wealth, we'll create opportunity, create role models, and we'll be able to move forward as a community.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good answer, John. Very insightful. So the question from the audience has to do with back to data again. And it's really around sort of the reaction that corporate America has had to, like the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matters movement. And, everyone has their diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, but where's the data? Where are you showing us the as you talked about, John, the piece, right? Where's your spend on people? Where's your representation on people from, diverse backgrounds? Where's your spend in terms of dollars with diverse businesses? So what can we do to prompt or to ensure that these firms are being transparent with data and pushing for that, to see that data? How do we go about that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it comes from a couple places. I think you use the right term. Transparency is critical. You just think about one example. Our Speaker of the House, Chris Welch, who is a terrific African-American leader, he insisted that all the corporations in Illinois be transparent around the boards of directors they had, and came back with data that showed there are several large companies, from Walgreens to Kraft Heinz, that had no African-Americans on the board. Once they had transparency, next thing you know, Walgreens picks Valerie Jarrett to be on the board. And before you know it, they've got a Black CEO at Walgreens. All started with transparency. I think that is so, so important. So I think what we need is our political leaders to continue to call for transparency on the C-suite jobs and how the money is being spent, because that's where the wealth's created. The people who are the general counsels, the CFOs, CEOs, people on the management committee, they're the ones that create wealth and then spread that wealth. You see how the money's being spent. You've got to measure that precisely. And so one of the things I've been thinking that we're working in Washington around is we think it'd be important for political leaders in Washington to think about all the companies that are getting all this stimulus money and all the various, huge amounts of dollars that are coming from the federal government because of COVID, to hold all the recipients of that money, to force them to be transparent with how they spend the money. Are they only spending it with their traditional white male, club, or are they going to reach out and spread the wealth? Do those institutions have diversity in their C-suite and on their management committees? We have the ability now to hold people accountable, because almost, so many of the largest corporations are getting direct subsidies from the federal government now. All the universities, hospitals, and museums are getting direct dollars from the federal government. So it's an opportunity to force them to be transparent with how that money is being spent, and again, how their C-suites and their boards look. It's a real window of opportunity here, we think, for that kind of transparency that will drive change and equal opportunity for our community.
John, thank you for answering that, because that gives me a point on our research. I hope our research team is in on this conversation and hearing, because I think that's a great point of research, is collecting data from these companies on their diversity report. And everybody wants to be on a list, especially if they get on a list that says they're doing something great. So we need to give them that opportunity. Get on the list, show people that you have a good, strong diversity platform. And so I hope our research people are listening. We'll get on that. That's good information. Thank you.
I do.
What we wanted.
That there's a lot more research being done in that vein, Rick. Especially I've noticed, having retired from the Federal Reserve System, that a lot of the reserve banks are paying more attention and focusing their economic research on how it's directly impacting communities of color. And so I think we'll start to see a lot more hard data coming out. And when I say hard data, I don't mean bad data. I mean, valid data that can be used to make policy decisions and positions. So wondering if both John and Rick might discuss your thoughts on how to sustain the gains that have been made in closing the Black wealth gap. how do we begin to teach the youth in our community to build wealth, what it means to build wealth, and you know, how that happens not only through sort of the business perspective that John might take, but also from your perspective, Rick, in terms of, you know, what the art and that community can bring to bear. So.
I'll start, you know, and give you know, just remind the audience a little bit of the data that I think is critically important. And one, you know, you're well aware of, Valerie, you know, it's interesting. There's a premise that things are better in terms of the wealth gap, but the data actually shows the opposite pretty dramatically. So the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, with Ray Bashar's leadership and others there in St. Louis, they came up with this data that between 1992 and 2016, college-educated African Americans saw their wealth decline 10%, while college-educated whites saw their wealth increase 96%. You know, that's an extraordinary gap, up 96% for, again, college-educated whites, down 10% for college-educated blacks. It's very consistent with the data that you know that Kerwin Charles, the now dean of Yale's Business School and a longtime esteemed professor at the University of Chicago, he has all kinds of data that's very similar, but my favorite talking point there is he says, relative to white Americans, today, Black Americans are worse off than our grandparents were. You know, since 1940, it's been a steady decline. This wealth gap just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And people just have, again, this just entirely false impression that things are better than they are. So one thing that I do tell people that I think is important for us to, you know, it's always important to effectively invest and save and do all those things in the right way. But we also need, and I know there's lots of work going on, we got to get our young people focused on the parts of the career paths that are going to be the successful career paths of the 21st century. It is financial services. It is technology. You know, it's all the things in the media space that are happening that we see, you know, with the FANG stocks people talk about. And too often we go down the same path we've always gone down. Same career paths of parents and grandparents and the like. Some of it's because of the implicit unconscious biases out there, and we pass along the same career paths from generation to generation. We have to create more success stories, more role models, and more intentionality in getting our community fixated and focused on the career paths where the wealth is going to be created over the next 40 years, not what maybe it was 60 or 40 years ago. So that's kind of the messaging that I have. But the main one is that things are worse than people think. They're getting worse, and we need a dramatic shift if we want to move our people in the right direction.
Yeah.
Rick,
Yeah.
what do you
The only thing I'd add to that is just that, you know, and as I've been getting more involved in this and just really getting people to understand this difference between wealth and income, you know, I mean, most people want to, you know, in our communities, they think about, you know, if you can get a good job, you know, if you can get a good income, then you're there. But, you know, that's not the building of wealth, you know, and so, you know, I think it's just kind of getting people to understand that there's another step, you know, there's you can go much deeper.
Great. Well, thank you both. I've got one more question from the audience, and I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to mess it up. It says, virtually all of the large Black businesses of the past were based in the Black community and served the Black community. The new civic committee effort is trying to create large businesses starting from a very different vantage point. Purchases by white corporate America. Could this be why the benefits of this area, of this effort, aren't showing up in the Black neighborhoods broadly? So, John, I guess maybe that's a question that you might address.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are going on there that are, you know, a little bit, I'm not sure how to put them all together, but I'll try my best, you know, because there really was a period, you're right, that the biggest African-American businesses were often located on the south side of Chicago and sold products to other African-Americans. But if you think about it, Johnson Publishing couldn't have been successful if they weren't getting advertising from the largest white corporations in America. the big blue chip Fortune 500 companies who advertise regularly. When you read John Johnson's book, Succeeding Against the Odds, he not only focused on getting retail sales and getting placed in Walgreens and Jewel Foods so that people could find his magazines, but he was fixated on getting Zenith to advertise. So it has been a long history there for success. We have to get white American companies to understand the importance of working with Black businesses, because not only it's the fair thing to do and the morally right thing to do, but it'll make their businesses stronger. When those folks advertised in Ebony and Jet, they built their businesses. They got more and more people consume their products because they were reaching the potential consumer that was there. So I tell people all the time, Dr. King always talked about the fact that progressive white Americans often say how much they deplore prejudice, but they accept or ignore economic injustice. And so we've got to make sure that when people are making these economic decisions in the corporate suite, that they're telling the next generation of, let's say, buyers of advertising that, you need to be advertising in Black enterprise. We're advertising on WVON radio here in Chicago. And if people don't get that message of how important that is, it's hard for those businesses to grow and survive and to thrive and to employ our people again, build philanthropy in our own communities, build role models in our own communities. So we need the giant companies downtown to do that. The second thing I'd say is when you build large Black businesses of scale, no matter where they're headquartered, they're going to employ people that are throughout the Chicagoland area. And we're all going to be supporting extended family. When you have some success, you create some wealth, you're going to be helping everyone in your family because of the historical lack of wealth in our community, because of Jim Crow and because of historical discrimination and all the things we faced. And you're going to support your friends and family who start businesses. So whenever everyone needs friends and family when they start a company. If you're a Black entrepreneur, you're going to go to see more often than not, go to see a Black success story to get the capital you need to start your company. So the extension of having businesses of scale, it ends up impacting our community and much broader than just the people that are working downtown and living downtown. It's going to reach much broader cross section. And then finally, when you have strong businesses like George Johnson's and John Johnson's, they created so much philanthropy for our community. They supported civil rights leaders, from Reverend Jackson to political leaders like Harold Washington. All those things came from very successful Black entrepreneurs. They spent their money and gave money back. Always remember Ed Gardner from Soft Sheen Products. He had Black on Black Love campaign to stop the violence in the Black community. He renovated the Regal Theater. All these great things happen from successful businesses. You can remember John Johnson creating the Ebony Jet fashion show and all the dollars that went to the United Negro College Fund every year. So sometimes people say, why should we support Black businesses of scale and just make a few people wealthier? They don't see this broad extension of the success that these companies provide to our community and all the wealth and role modeling that comes from it and all the philanthropy that comes from it.
Right. Thank you, John. So one last question I'm going to pose to Rick. So Rick, I really don't think that you're the type of artist that wants us to simply admire your work. So what are the verbs, the actions, the changes that you want us to come away with from your wonderfully inspired project?
Wow. Well, for me, I want to learn. I think we have been, so much of the stuff that John is talking about are things that he's talking about from a platform of knowledge and understanding, in his circle of people, his circle of influence. But there's a whole nother side where there's just no knowledge. There's no knowledge. There's no, as I spend a lot of time walking through communities. I walk through I've put a lot of miles on my feet walking through the South Side of Chicago over the last couple of years, trying to understand and see things. And everywhere I go, I do that. And I just see in our communities, we're not getting that. And so we're not getting the kinds of things that John has experienced and he can articulate and communicate. So we have to figure that out. And so what I'm hoping that Black Wall Street journey will be able to do over time is to be able to leverage that knowledge that's out there, that's among our community, people that know they know the green shoots, they know the statistics, they know the data. We have to pull that stuff out and figure out how to get that stuff out in different ways. I mean, even I'm not one to just think they're like grand solutions to things, but I think we just have to do the work. We have to do the work, and we, and we just, go, at a level that we can impact who we can, and so things like Natalie Moore's billboard project through Black Wall Street Journey of these quotes on bus stops around. I mean, I think those kinds of things, as we get more information and more kind of green shoot information, more data that can help educate people around this stuff, I think those become important. And hopefully we can leverage all that knowledge, that wealth of knowledge that we have among our Black leaders in the business community, and academics, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Wonderful way to sort of wrap up, because this whole notion of storytelling, John's sharing his storytelling with us, you sharing stories through your artwork. That's hopefully what we will continue to have happen in terms of inspiration from your work. And so it's just been very enjoyable to spend some time with you this evening. I speak for all of us saying that we wish we had more time for discussion. We've got so many more questions that we just weren't able to get to, and I apologize to the audience for that. But I would just like to thank you both for all you do to make the world a better place, a more equitable and just world. And I would just simply ask that you both continue to be a blessing. So thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you both. Yep.
And to our audience, thanks for participating in this and hopefully thought-provoking conversation. I know I've certainly enjoyed it and could have gone on much longer. Much to think about and act upon. In this vein, on behalf of the Smart Museum of Art, University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, and Arts and Public Life, I encourage you to visit Rick's Black Wall Street Journal project at the Smart Museum, at Urban Juncture, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Additional presentations of art by exhibiting MacArthur Fellows can be found at other Toward Common Cause exhibition venues throughout the city. Please check the website towardcommoncause.org for more information. Additional Smart Museum and Booth Art plus Business collaborations are in progress, so stay tuned. And finally, I hope that you'll continue to participate in dynamic programming and dialogue by and with all of our partner organizations and others at UChicago. Thanks again, good night, and good wishes to you all.